thank you for joining me today. And I know you've done webinars on your own before, which I thank you so much for. But I thought today it'd be good, another good opportunity to be in conversation and to hear a little bit more about your story. Because I'm also very aware that after 2 years, isn't it 2 years? Tell me, where are you in terms of being alcohol free?
Just over 3 years now.
Oh, just over 3 years. Yeah. That it's still not an easy ride. There are still times that are difficult. And I thought touching on some of those today would be really interesting because we like to think things will all be perfect once giving up drinking happens. So I wonder if you could tell me a little bit about first of all, about your motivations for giving up and maybe a little bit about those first few months.
Okay. Well, I'll start with the drink as tradition. It's a single malt lime squash. Oak cask
Is it fizzy water or still water?
It's still water from the tap. But the glass is my favourite. I think I've featured it before. When we were on holiday in France the last couple of years, the French supermarkets have amazing alcohol-free selection. It really puts the UK to shame. And one of my favourites over there is called Tourtel Twist, which is like a lager with some sort of fruit addition. So I got this little beaker on eBay actually just to sort of celebrate that. So that's my beaker of choice is the old Tourtel Twist.
Oh, well, if we're sharing then I will show you that my new counting bottle.
Oh, lovely.
Which is a water bottle, but it counts every time I upload it, every time I fill it with more water. God, I'm totally in tech world. I can twist it to see how many I've drunk. But I haven't drunk many today because I've had absolutely loads of tea instead. But anyway, it's on the water now because it's 7 p.m.
Yeah, I'm a tea junkie too.
Yeah. So, okay. So tell me a little bit more about your motivations for changing your drinking and a little bit about what those first few months was like.
Okay, well, the starting date is March the 22nd, 2015. I'd just come back from quite a big birthday bash. We were supposed to fly out to Madrid, but 4 of the boys missed the plane. They got held up in Bristol and roadworks, and I made it to the airport, actually. I was the sensible one, took public transport, made it to the airport. We ended up spending that weekend in Bath, actually, because we all missed our flights to Madrid. And it was a joint 40th celebration. But it came during quite a poignant week for me because it was also sort of coincided with my last week in a job from which I was being made redundant. And it was a job that I'd just settled into, really, just 1.5 years into it, and thinking, right, life is all cushy now and tickety-boo. And then all of a sudden, sort of just over 1 year into the job, you're summoned for a coffee with my line manager and told it was coming to an end. So it was quite, that big sort of celebratory weekend coming in the midst of a bit of a jumble, really, personally, with that. And yeah, I got absolutely trolleyed on that weekend, and it was coming back home, I think, on the Sunday, or maybe it was the day after. It was the Sunday. I was just putting my clothes into the washing machine, etc. And I was just standing there in the kitchen on my own, and I sort of said to myself, Carwyn, you can't drink in this state. You cannot drink, because the problem I'd had, I suppose, since I was 18, so it's, just over 20 years of having known alcohol. So I was actually teetotal. I followed my grandfather, who was a minister of religion in Wales. So when I was a teenager, he was one of my heroes as a kid growing up. He was a very principled man. He was into politics and religion, and that was the sort of line I wanted to take. So from 16 to 18, I was actually quite principled and didn't drink at all. Then it went sort of downhill after hitting university. And my experience with alcohol would be to not drink a huge amount from day to, I wasn't addicted or alcoholic or anything like that, but on those, flashpoint occasions, big nights out with friends, especially long lost friends, if there's any sort of emotion involved, catching up with old friends in Aberystwyth, or if it was a big rugby match or a big football match or whatever it was, if there was some sort of emotional edge to the occasion. I'd more often not end up in tears and crying or singing.
But that's interesting, because what you're saying to me is that when you were in very happy situations, you wanted to make yourself happier, and then it got incredibly emotional for you. Whereas lots of people do the opposite, which is drinking when they're very depressed or low.
Indeed, I've never really thought about it like that. So yeah, I'd get I might have had quite a good day. I remember some of the times in Aberystwyth, I might have had a really good day busking with the harp, which is my passion. Might have made £100. All fired up, go out and meet my old mates in Aberystwyth, have a skinful, start singing, then start crying, and walk over a field back to my girlfriend's house, now my wife. Get into really random, not illegal, but random situations, or phoning somebody while drunk, and just making things worse. So erratic, I'd say. Erratic,
but also from a highly happy emotional place, which then took you into a very low emotional place.
Very often, you see that, those of you familiar with Mary Poppins, you've got the guy who laughs himself and he floats up to the top of the ceiling, and then all of a sudden you think, oh, I'm feeling too happy now, I've got to come down. I suppose alcohol had that sort of, effects on your mental health, doesn't it, as I've learned. So I think it was in one of those episodes 3 years ago, I thought, right, there's no way I can afford to, as upset as I am now, to because if I was upset and drunk, that was also a lethal combination as well. And I thought, right, let's put an end to it. And it's it was in a moment of crisis, but it's something that's sort of stuck, and it's something that's held, and it's now almost like an article of faith. Life is tough, but for one reason or another, that decision to quit has become mixed up, I suppose, in that pot with stuff like faith and love and stuff like that I've also been thinking about, and it's something that holds me very, very firm in those difficult moments.
But that's interesting, because you'll find a lot of people in Club Soda will postpone giving up, or will make a different decision on a different day based around the fact that they're going through difficult circumstances, a bereavement, a job loss. And their immediate reaction is, I can't give up now, this is too difficult, I need to drink. Whereas your reaction was, this is now, shit's hit the fan, I'm going to stop.
Indeed. And one thing that, as I've gone on, as the time has gone on without drinking, you start to think about wider issues. So stuff like, what sort of role has alcohol played in my family in the past? What sort of role does alcohol play in society? For example, it can be a rugby match, and looking at Cardiff being, torn to shreds by alcohol on a rugby international. So, the advertising industry, and you could say the same for betting as well in sport. The juggernaut of money that is behind the alcohol industry, that's behind the betting industry, etc. So considering those wider social things, I've lost my thread a little bit, but I'd say, one thing that has come to the fore over the last year or year and a half is perhaps the way that my father would sometimes turn towards alcohol as a dependency. I'm very, very similar to my dad in nature, in personality, I think, in mannerisms, all sorts of things. And I suppose my decisions, I would love to be like my dad, as a role model to my children. But let's have a little experience, see what sort of dad would have been without the beer, if you like. So that sort of thinking has come to the fore recently.
And thinking about the fact that, heightened emotions is a really big trigger for you. How did you deal with, weddings, your reunions, those events where you wanted to heighten your emotion in the first few months of giving up? How did you manage to keep on course?
Oh no, on the opposite. Because coincidentally, after giving up, I did face 4 or 5 social events. The first of which actually was my redundancy party in Leicester. And that was part of the emotion back then. Was the job was linked to Leicester, which is where I'm from, and I sort of fell in love with that job because it gave me a chance to go back home, if you like, once every month or so. So it was a particularly bitter blow having to lose that link again. But yeah, so that was my first event, and I did have 6 or 7 Beck's Blue lined up on my hotel room in case I felt I needed to hit the bottle. I ended up having about 2 of them or 3. I had a wedding, had a stag weekend. There were 5 or 6 quite sharp social occasions just after I gave up, and on each occasion the aim was to tone down the emotion. It was a bit of a, I suppose, step into the unknown, because I'm not sure how, clubs. I wasn't aware of club soda back then, and so I was sort of really doing it off my own bat. And to start with, I thought, right, I've got to get a case of alcohol-free beer. We need to find this stuff quick and drink it. Then I suppose over the weeks and months, I sort of realised, well, no, alcohol-free beer is okay, but then, looking at J2O, lime juice, actually, alcohol-free beer with lime juice, lime cordial became a favourite. So I started discovering my own favourite soft drinks, if you like, pretty quickly. Alcohol-free beer. I know there's a little bit of debate about alcohol-free beer. Is it a gateway to going back to drinking alcohol? Well, I'd say no. If alcohol-free beer is what you need at a particular moment, then that's all well and good as far as I'm concerned. It's what I needed back then. I don't need it now, although I love a couple of the German alcohol-free beers, Erdinger and Warsteiner. I'd say the Warsteiner 0% is preferable to 90% of the beers I used to drink when I was drinking. So I've got 3 or 4 Warsteiners in the fridge that I'll have on a warm summer evening. So yeah, so scrabbling about for a strategy to start with, but I was never in doubt about wanting to stay dry.
And that's interesting, because that means your commitment was incredibly strong.
Yes.
At the time. How about your confidence at the start? Because those are the 2 key things. You need to be committed and you need to be confident. And you were scrabbling around for a strategy, but how confident were you about your ability to stay that way?
Well, I think I sort of took myself aback, I suppose, and in the moment that I sort of made that decision, I sort of took myself aback by the strength of it and the ferocity, and the bollocking, I suppose, that I gave to myself in those moments, which sort of stayed with me, and immediately find it, getting, I suppose, compliments from friends. I remember a wedding where I was actually quite upset about something else on the night, but actually ended up getting a couple of compliments from friends on my behaviour. And since then, people saying, yeah, it really suits you. And doing things like helping in Club Soda, or, I'm a trustee on a recovery charity. It feels like the decision was made for me. Now, I hesitate to bring God into this, because I know, people have different views on and my faith is I've lost a lot of faith in biblical God, but if you were to say that this is a path that has been given to me to follow, particularly in terms of helping others, doing things like the webinar tonight, or doing social evenings, or just chipping in on Club Soda, it feels like, more than any job that I've ever done, apart from playing the harp perhaps, this was a job that was meant for me, a vocation, something that I take pleasure in, and being able to give back.
And that's interesting, actually, because when we first met, when we were 21, 22. It
was in 2000. I would have been about 25.
How old was I then? I don't know. Anyway, I was about the same age. We both nearly missed a plane to the States.
30, yes.
I wasn't 30. I wasn't 30. Anyway, we were very young. We were both doing politics, which for me is a vocation and a passion.
Yes.
And now, as I come to this stage of Club Soda, I begin to think that actually that might not have been totally where my passion has led me here, but this might be actually more valuable than what I was doing before, if you see what I mean. And I've brought all the skills from there, which is why Club Soda is a movement and not, we've got that feeling of empowerment and doing things, but definitely. So maybe that was always there within you, but we found different routes and have now settled somewhere where our direct personal experience is even more valuable.
And they say sometimes, you know, in some of your darkest moments, you sort of find yourself or who you are, or you're tested. And certainly that seems to have been, you know, let's call it a fortunate coincidence that in that moment, you know, my first ever redundancy, I've also found the most meaningful voluntary work that I've ever done here in Club Soda, and being able to make an instant impact in some of the comments that I make sometimes, you know, saying, oh, well, why didn't you try that? Oh, yeah, never thought of that. You get the response, and it's been very nice. And, you know, I think that there is that problem, isn't there, that those of us that have been alcohol-free for longer, that danger that you brag about it, or you boast about it, or gloat about, you know, and I've always tried to be mindful of that, and so I always go back to my own day one, just as I have now, and it's nice being able always to identify. Well, you know, when I'm thinking, yeah, okay, I'll spend 15 minutes on Club Soda, I always try and check out the people who are on day 3 or 4 or day 1, day 9, in order to always root myself back in that day one. In, you know, how was I feeling? What emotions were going around back then?
You're right, because it's easy to forget. And also because we've been through and now feel far more confident in our own sobriety, what we do is we want to save everyone else the hardship and say, stop giving in, stop doing this, just get on with it, just trust us. You know, we want to save everyone the pain, but actually we can't do that because, you know, we had to get there ourselves, and we all have to get there ourselves. But I do like the idea that that even 3 years on, dipping back into Club Soda is part of your sobriety as well.
Yeah, well, for a while, about, you know, perhaps 6 months, a year ago, I'd actually sort of almost checked out of Club Soda altogether, because I was finding, you know, I've got quite a demanding job as a caseworker, so I'm dealing daily almost with other people's mental health issues, with other people's life problems. You know, I've got 2 children as well, and family with its own demands, and I was finding Club Soda too much. No, I can't involve myself every day in people's mental health, and because I believe that's a key factor, that alcohol is related to mental health. Everybody has a mental health. That's something I've learned about in training, in my current work. So these are fundamental mental health questions, I think, that are on there, and it's demanding and it's tough. So I sort of checked out of Club Soda, but more recently, what I've done, I've set up a little bit of a system where I'll dip in and perhaps help 3 people on a particular evening when I'm in the mood, and I think it helps me to feel that I'm still one of the gang, if you like. Just say hello to Duncan, my friend, one of my old drinking friends from Scotland, who's now also a Club Soda aficionado. So hi Duncan up in Scotland.
Yes, me and Duncan have been having a debate about quiffs, and he has his on his chin, so he's allowed into Club Soda. I think that's how we were working it. But I'm interested that you set up a system, and that you also use the search. Do you use the search function in Club Soda to find people on day 1 and day 3? Or...
I tend to just check into Club Soda together to that big mix of people, and have a look. As I said, I've got to be in the mood for it, because there's no point. I can't help other people if I'm in a grumpy mood or whatever it is. So it tends to be, you know, people who are perhaps on day 3, day 4. You know, I've got, you know, I remember one the other night. I've reached day 10, and I've got this works do coming up, and that struck a chord with me, because I remember being in that sort of situation in those first couple of weeks. Oh my gosh, I've got this stag weekend, or whatever it was. So yeah, just a little bit of reassurance and guidance. And as I remember, one thing that I'd recommend to anyone who watches this is to keep a log of those various events where you've managed to stay dry, because you'll soon find that the list of events grows pretty quickly. And as you can look back and say, oh yeah, I did that wedding, I did that stag weekend, I did that works function, or football match, whatever it is, sooner or later you've got 10 or 12 events that you've managed to negotiate, and it really builds your confidence. So I've kept that going over 3 years.
Cool. So I'm just going to let anyone know if they want to ask any questions. Now is a good time to put them in the question box because they take a little while to come through. But in the meantime, I was going to ask a few other questions, which is a bit about life in high definition, because you've talked about being in the right mood to talk to people, and also the fact that, you know, you took some time away from Club Soda and so on. How do you live life in high definition now? How do you deal with that emotional without knowing that you've got alcohol to fall back on?
Well, I found it a massive, massive advantage. I suppose I've never been one who turns to alcohol deliberately in a crisis. My gosh, this is a bad moment, I've got to drink. I was never ever in that point. So it's wonderful because no matter what the situation is, you wake up in the morning. And this came to me quite early on after a few months. Immediately you've got an advantage, turning to tennis language, I suppose, that advantage over how many million people are waking up with a hangover today. No matter how tough the situation is. I remember what it was like to wake up with a hangover or have a weekend with a hangover. You're starting immediately with that blank sheet of paper. You can add to that by, you know, I exercise quite a lot now. Go out on the bike, make yourself feel a little bit more better again. You know, get a good start at work. So you've immediately, from that basis of knowing that you're not hangover, you haven't got that stinky breath and clothes and grogginess and needing to have a bacon sandwich and all the stuff that goes with the hangover, you know that you can at least try and mitigate the situation or tackle it or put a strategy in place. So it's a massive, massive advantage, and I persuade anyone to try and look at it from that point of view.
Cool. Well, look, Claire's saying that she's on day one. She managed 5 months before, but she can't seem to get back there. What would be your top tips for her? So
she's gone 5 months and then...
She's done 5 months before and now she's back at day one and doesn't seem to feel that she can get anywhere near the 5 months.
Right.
Again.
First of all, do not ignore the 5 months that you've done. They are in the bank. You have done 5 months without drinking. That is a massive, massive achievement. Okay? The fact that you've gone back and slipped, or that you feel that you've slipped, does not consign those 5 months to the bin. Coming from Leicester, the analogy that I've sometimes used is, you know, anyone who follows football will remember Leicester City miraculously winning the league a couple of years ago. During that season, they played, 42 or how many matches they had to play. Leicester City lost 3 games. Now, the question I put, did Leicester City dwell on... I think got hammered 5-2 in one of them by Arsenal or somebody. Did Leicester City dwell on the 3 matches that they lost? Does anyone remember? Does anyone care that Leicester City lost 3 games? No. You know, for 50 or 100 years, people will look back and say Leicester won the league.
And they were there. They were the outsiders. They were never expected to do it as well. And you know, none of us are ever expected to give up drinking because the social norm is to drink. Yeah. So we are all Leicester City. Yeah.
And we indeed, and we all have that, you know, in mental health again, that negative bias in the brain. It's something that goes back thousands of years. We're trained, you know, fight or flight. We're trained to look for the danger, for the negative in everything. And we all carry it. I carry it. You carry it. And so, you know, you've done amazing, Claire, getting to 5 months. But your brain will say, oh, God, I've slipped for an evening. And you'll immediately unravel that. So keep those 5 months, you know, safe in your heart and start again, you know, call it 5 months and day one if you want, or find some way of building that 5 months, hardwiring those 5 months into your brain and into your strategy for starting again. Please do not ignore those 5 months.
Yeah, because you know you can do it. I mean, the other thing I'd say is if you're here on this webinar, you're doing the right thing. Because you're immersing yourself in the subject, you're hearing other people's advice and their experiences. And more importantly, you're seeing that, you know, we are mostly ordinary people. Yes. I wouldn't say we're 100% ordinary because I don't believe in ordinary. But, you know, we're not anything special. No. The fact that we've managed to do it is as much a bloody surprise to us as it is to anybody else. And all that we've managed to do is to have what you had at the beginning, which was a very unswerving commitment to doing something about it.
Yeah.
And then you put strategies in place. You planned.
I'm not sure how much planning there was actually, but
yeah, but for
but
much people, it's about planning the events that you go to. You did plan that your leaving do. You had those 5 bottles of Beck's Blue lined up. You did it without thinking about it in reality. But the more you think about it, the more you concentrate on it, the more you immerse yourself in the subject, just like you would with the diet. I spent 3 bloody hours this afternoon putting my week's food onto a diet app. And that means I'm more likely to stick to my diet. And it's exactly the same with drinking. If you put plans in place for all these occasions and all these emotional triggers, these triggers within you, the more likely you are to succeed. So you can do it.
Indeed. And I'll tell you what, this is something I've been reflecting on. Over the last couple of, coincidentally, again, since giving up, I've hit this really tough series of bereavements, 5 or 6 of them. They've just hit me for different reasons. There's been 1 or 2 absolute tragedies in there. And then another 2 or 3 that, perhaps, less tragic, but hit me right in the heart. I'm a very emotional person. And it's felt recently that like those have just hit me bang, 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 like London buses. You've got other stuff coming on. I've been in a good job for 2 years, but I know in the next few months, that's going to be under consideration because of change of contract. There's stuff going on in my wife's work that is, always quite turbulent. It seems to be anyway. My mother has got a series of health related issues, and speaking to other friends and peers in a similar age group, this sort of stuff sort of hits us in our 40s and our 50s. We're entering that stage of life. We've got children to look after. We're not in our 20s anymore, and 30s. It's a new and difficult stage of life, and in that context, I'm finding that sticking to that, if, as you say, article of faith of remaining alcohol free is really a way of going back. It's like a feedback loop. You go then back, and that feedback loop is I haven't drunk. I'm starting today sober, and all the better for it. And
nothing's improved by drinking. However much we may feel that short-term hit will do us some good. In fact, none of these emotional things, none of those bereavements, none of those work situations would ever be improved by drinking. And if you think about it logically, you know it. So logic is really important.
Indeed, and I just wish this sort of awareness and these resources had been available to our parents' generation, and the generations who have gone before. My daughter's studying mindfulness at the moment in primary school. Somebody's been doing mindfulness. I've done mental health first aid at work. I know lots of other people have been doing those sorts of mental health awareness classes. If only these resources had been available to our parents and previous generations, and you wonder, the expenditure on NHS and police and all the frontline services that have to mop up the destruction of some of these behaviours. How much could have been saved had things like Club Soda been in place a generation ago.
Yeah, it'd be helpful if they gave us some money as well. But anyway, the interesting thing for me is that often when people are on day 1 or they've had a blip, they feel embarrassed and don't come on Club Soda. And part of the thing I will always say is Club Soda community itself is a behaviour change technique in itself. The more you interact with other people on a similar journey, the more you hear from people who might be just a little bit ahead of you, the more you hold yourself accountable to other people by saying out loud, I'm not drinking today, the more likely you are to succeed. And often we hide away from Club Soda when either we're embarrassed by the fact that we've blipped, or we want to carry on drinking because we don't want to have that accountability by telling people we've done it. We want to go on a bit longer before we then come back. And so actually just a daily practice of doing what you do, coming on even just for 10 minutes is worth it, just so you can feel like you're not alone.
Yeah. And one thing I'd say to Claire, who you mentioned a few minutes ago, who's done 5 months, then blipped on back on when, is that shows a lot of honesty and integrity to come and admit that error, if you like, or mistake or whatever you want to call it, and to hold yourself accountable. That in itself is worth credit, I think, Claire. You know, you've done your 5 months and you've been honest and gone, you know, stuck your head on the block and gone public. You know, you deserve credit for that and forgiveness, if you like, and the chance to move on. You know, as I said, to month 5+1.
I'm just laughing because Yusi's just brought my shopping in that's come from outside. Yeah. But again, I've brought all my food up in advance so that I don't slip this week in my diet. And it's exactly the same for being alcohol free. So I'm very grateful for him for getting my food in.
And hi to Juicy. It was lovely to meet him in the event in London last year.
Yeah.
I want to add a point as well. Again, something that has just come to me in the last couple of months, this feeling of being able to assume a position of leadership, a little bit of leadership and responsibility. If somebody had said to me 3 or 4 years ago, Carwyn, you will have, quite a reasonable position of leadership within an alcohol support organisation, you'd have laughed at it. And it's something I take great pride. As I said, going back to football, it feels now after 3 years as if somebody has handed me, if you like, a captain's armband, if you like, and said, right, you've done 3 years. It's your responsibility, if you want, or your opportunity to go back there and try and lead other people out of similar sorts of mess. It's something that I take a great deal of pride in. And I'd say to people who have perhaps cracked it after 6 weeks or 6 months, to encourage them to do the same, because people who've managed to crack it after 6 weeks, you now have got something to offer people who are on day 6.
Absolutely.
I think I mentioned this to somebody a couple of weeks ago who'd sort of stayed dry for a number of months and was just not feeling any buzz. Life was mundane, boring. Alcohol wasn't an issue, but there was no joy in it. Well, I said, we'll get back in there, get stuck in on Club Soda, because you have insight and experience that will help others who are at a more junior stage. So it's something that brings a lot of pride to be able to get
But
back.
also they need to speak to other people who've got to 6 months and there isn't masses of little epiphanies, and they need to work out what to do next to bring that joy into their life, because sometimes that takes a bit more work than we think. It might not always be instant. So, and often because we've taken alcohol out, we struggle to work out what to put in its place. And sometimes we're anxious and nervous about doing new things. And I want to tell people, you have time to do many new things. You don't have to become the next Picasso, but you could do one painting day. You don't have to take up pursuits for life, but you could do some experimenting.
Or not even that. It can be a case of getting back into the grain of something you already love. And in my case, I've been very lucky at work again to have a bit of life coaching and stuff, and mentoring, and it sort of dawned on me that although my if you like, my professional office-based career has really chopped and changed, it's been quite turbulent. What has always been there, without really thinking about it, is I've been a harpist for 25 years. And being able to look at that as, if you like, a scaffolding, if you like, within which my other jobs sort of fit. So it can be just getting back into the grain of something that you love, but perhaps neglected, or took for granted, maybe.
But also it's recognising that that actually most of life is just about feeling okay.
Yeah.
And because of social media and because of the way telly is at the minute and everything, we're expected that life's meant to be one great big high. And actually that's not how it is. And if it was, you wouldn't recognise the highs anyway, when you were drinking. So actually life is generally just okay. And the great joy of life is when you get those high points where you do something lovely, or you connect with somebody, or you enjoy something very different.
Yeah. Well, I read, I follow Twitter. I'm a Twitter addict, and I follow a lot of these motivational quotes and stuff, and a lot of it is nonsense, I suppose, or cliche. But one of them has stuck out. I can't remember where I saw it, but one said, if your life is 60% good, as a middle-aged man who's losing his hair, if your life is 60% in place, then you're doing very, very well.
Yeah.
Something else I saw somewhere is mundane is good. Mundane means safety and security. It means your children are safe. It means your family are all set up for the next day. And perhaps when I was less mature, maybe that, you know, always looking for that next hit or high or whatever it was. Mundane isn't a bad thing to be.
No, absolutely, because it allows you to have days that aren't mundane and they're even more special because of it.
Yeah.
So, and it's normal.
Yeah, and the stuff you can do for free. You can do voluntary work. You can exercise. It's stuff that doesn't cost a penny. You know, you can, I don't know, go and see a friend. Stuff that we take for granted.
Yeah, and it's just as good to come on Club Soda and ask people for those ideas as well.
Indeed.
Right, I'm going to let you go now because you are also the only person who does the webinars while actually holding your device rather than your arms must be aching, Carwyn.
It's okay. Well, I've been in the gym quite a bit, so
oh really?
The arms are pretty good.
So really, you're just showing off that you've got some muscles.
But I'm happy to stay on if you. I don't know how long you had lined up.
No, now's good, and there isn't any more questions. And I suspect we'll do another conversation again one day.
Okay.
Maybe picking on a particular topic. I'm really keen to think through some more stuff with you around mental health, and obviously people will comment on this and watch again. So let's leave it there, and I will speak to you soon.
Thank you, Lauren. Good night, everybody. Nice to
yeah, lots of love to you and your family. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.